Hello, everybody. Welcome to Watches with Dennis, and it is the Saturday live stream. So I am back. I am obviously Dennis, and we only will have one topic today. We are going to go ahead and have a conversation about Patek Philippe and their new release that has just come out a few days ago. There was a leak about the Cubitus, and then I think one of the magazine photos actually is what ended up getting shared. And then in the course of people going around and waiting and speculating and thinking, as a spoiler, the reaction has not been super positive because people were really speculating that it was an AI generated image originally. And then a day or two later, the watch comes out and we have it. So we will be talking about that today. And that will be our only topic of note. As usual, housekeeping items. I had one pre-recorded video this last week. I covered 4 underappreciated watch brands. And if you haven't seen the video, I'll tell you which ones that are in it. It's Breguet, Citizen, Zenith, and Parmigiani Fleurier. And that was because I haven't done a pre-recorded video in about a month. And while I enjoy doing the live streams a lot, I do try and have something that's maybe a little more evergreen as well versus the more timely topics that we cover here. So I wanted to do that. Plus, it was my birthday a few weeks ago, and one of my gifts was a teleprompter. So I always had to look to the side to read my scripts on my heavily scripted videos. And so you have to do a lot of masking, or I have to try and memorize little chunks, and it just takes forever. So actually being able to do that video was a test of that, because I needed to figure out placement so that you don't see the eyes moving across all the time. And then lighting becomes a challenge because you have to film through glass. This is one of those where it's encased. So it's just one of those things I went ahead and did. Now, normally when I do a topic video like today, where we're going to talk about a Patek Philippe, I would wear whatever brand of watch if I have it. And I don't have a Patek Philippe, so we can't be wearing a Patek. So I'm wearing the Parmigiani Fleurier. This is my Kalpa Tonda, the old model Tonda dress watch version. And that's more thematic to the pre-recorded video that I mentioned. So let me get caught up with the chat, and then we will dive into this, because we probably have thoughts, or at least I have some thoughts about this release. So first, Pixel Punch. Hello. I saw you actually got that in before I even went live. So welcome to the live stream. Glad you were able to make it. Kevin, welcome to you as well. Hope things are going well for you out in Florida. Tony asks, will we have Dennis Rage in this topic? Probably not. Not in the way that you perhaps are hoping for, because it's hard to get worked up about a watch I wasn't inherently looking forward to. So, but we'll see. You never know. Last week's live stream, I didn't think I would be raging on anything. I ended up raging on 2 of the watches, and it just happened. Pixel Punch hopes that it happens. Koji seems like he hopes it will happen. Also, thank you, Koji, for being 99 Club member. Hello, I'm Name. Yes, that's kind of the little it's actually really cool, the software. It's one of those newer ones, NEWER. They have some of the cheaper teleprompters that will encase like a camcorder or a cell phone or whatever, and it has a little tray. So you put like a tablet or a phone or whatever, and it reflects into the glass. Anyway, it has a little software with a little remote. So I found out the way you're supposed to do it is, like, there's a highlighted line, and you want it to go at just the right speed that you like to talk at, and then you're not looking up and down. But I'm not using that here, obviously, because for the live streams, you get ad-lib Dennis, and if things go really off the rails, I edit the recorded version. I've done that a few times where I've had travesties where I've backed out and killed the video for like 30 seconds and stuff. I'll go in and clean that up in post. But normally the live streams just stay a little rough, and typically are less popular than the pre-recorded videos anyway. Good morning, Trap Vision. Welcome to the live stream. Hope things are going well for you. All right. So we got to talk about the Cubitus. We're only going to talk about the Cubitus. There you go. Now you can start seeing the Cubitus. If you had not yet seen it, here's a little video from Patek's website. Now, I'm not going to really dive into articles about it, because we can see most of the stats now that it's up on Patek Philippe's website. So we have capability to talk about it. I do have 2 articles linked in the video, and I do have them tabbed up here. So there's an article from A Blog to Watch, which was the first one I read, and then Ben Clymer wrote an article for Hodinkee, which actually goes into a lot of history of Patek Philippe. But this design, unsurprisingly, is very, very polarizing, and for a variety of reasons. So I think I want to just go ahead and discuss some of the basics real quick, and I'll pull them up here on the screen. There are actually 3 different versions of this watch. In fact, I'll bounce to the Hodinkee article here because you can easily see them in their cover photo. So you have the stainless steel green version, which you see on the left. You see the two-tone with a blue dial on the right, and then they have one that they added complications to. This is actually in platinum, not steel, and that is the one in the center. So it's got the big date. It's got a day of the week, pointer day of the week in a sub-dial configuration with a moon phase, and then the running seconds is kind of in the, we'll say, 430-ish position. And so but sizing wise, they're all fairly similar. There are some differences with obviously the one with the complications, but the 45 millimeters in diameter, they're all 45 millimeters in diameter. The time plus date, I should say, ones are 8.3 millimeters thick. The complication one is thicker, but it's under 10 millimeters. They are all micro rotor automatic movements, but of course the movements are different. The time date ones are the caliber 330. That is a hacking movement. And then there's some differentials, of course, for the other movement, which I might have to bounce to. But I think the one of the key differences is the frequencies. So the 26-330 and the time date ones is a 4 hertz movement. I think they're doing a 3 hertz movement though in the one with a complication. Honestly, I should just go ahead and load it up so we take a look at it. And those are the basics of it. So sorry, I'm going through I should have preloaded this part. I didn't think about wanting to talk about the Cubitus's every model. And I realized we probably need to talk a little bit about the one with the complication. So there we go. It's just a tab away. We can be okay. So real quick on that. So that movement is the caliber 240 PS, 9.6 millimeters. That's the thickness. They're all 30 meters water resistant. You could see some shots of the movement here. And it was, yes, I am right. It is a 3 hertz movement. Okay. Power reserve is 48 hours on the complication version. And it's around 40 some, I think, on the other one too. Do they say? Yeah, 45. Okay. All right, you're starting to get a sense of where I'm going with this. So, my quick thoughts. I do not hate the look of this watch. But it's insipid is maybe a way to describe it. So it's uninspired. Well, it is inspired. The problem is we see the inspiration so clearly that it's very hard to get excited about it. So, what I do like, let me start with the things I'll praise. One, the case construction. I think this is a very interesting way. If you look at it, and the video here that you see from Patek's website, I think is doing a pretty decent job of giving you some glimpses of it. See how they've screwed in on the flanks? That's how they've closed the case. There are no screws in the case back. I like this. I think that's pretty clever. It's definitely different. And you see there's no screws in from the top either, because sometimes sometimes cases are designed to be accessed from the dial side. Usually not, usually the case back, but this is actually like a sandwich that's been closed off. And I actually think that, as you can see, ends up giving you really clean lines because those screws are basically hidden away in those recessed holes on the flanks of the case. Movement finishing, as is usual for a Patek, is very nice. The movement is quite attractive. They handsomely decorate it, Côte de Genève. They've got the striping on I think I said they were all micro rotors, and that is incorrect. I believe it's a micro rotor. Is it a micro rotor on the? Yes. All right. Sorry for the confusion. This was the problem when you're dealing with 2 different movements. So the complication version has a micro rotor, and you can see that they've even striped it much like the horizontal stripes of the dial that you can see here. Again, I think that's a pretty nice touch here. Let me minimize my head again so you don't see me so much. So I think that's a pretty nice touch. And I think they did the same style of decoration even on the non-micro rotor time plus date versions. And yes, they did. Just trying to get us to a photo where we can appreciate it. All right. So we got that. So I like that. Now, why I said it was insipid and the inspiration is obvious is, so there have been a lot of comparisons, a lot of analogies, a lot of what plus what equal Cubitus. And my I think the one I like is like the Nautilus and the Santos had a baby, and this is the baby, and the baby mostly takes after its dad. The dad was the Nautilus in the analogy. So we've got the same horizontal striping of the Nautilus. I think this is the same handset as the Nautilus. I'm not quite sure if the indices are the same, but they sure feel a lot like the same Nautilus. It's the same bracelet as the Nautilus. In fact, I think it is literally the same bracelet used on the Nautilus, which explains why these lugs look the same as the Nautilus, because they use the same bracelet. So it's so Nautilus that I'm left wondering, why wouldn't I just want to get a Nautilus instead of a Cubitus? So that's one of the issues I have with the watch. And I've never, so full disclosure for those that have not watched me a long time, or at least not watched me talk about Patek, because I don't cover Patek very often. I don't like the Nautilus. Like, I don't like the design does not speak to me. So it's unsurprising that this design likewise doesn't speak to me. Overall, I probably prefer, I prefer the square shape to whatever the Nautilus is, but I don't understand why you take the square and start making it a Nautilus, because the Nautilus is supposed to be like a porthole, and this is no longer anything like a porthole. This is like a Santos. Or a variety of other watches, a few of which we will discuss later in the episode. We still have the case flanks. You can see here on the 9 o'clock and 3 o'clock positions, much like the Nautilus. It's like 25 years since their last collection came out, and this is not creative. It was like, we need to do something different. And hey, look, and when they were working on this was in the pandemic. So they're like, hey, look at how popular a Nautilus is. So let's not deviate too far away from whatever that is. But I'm starting to mule a little bit. So that's a problem I have with it. So I've never liked a lot of the configuration. I think it just even makes less sense here than it did. At least with the Nautilus, there was a theme behind it. Like, Genta had a plan behind it. I mean, I liked his plan, but I'm not the biggest Genta fan. But this, I would rather have a Santos. Others have obviously pointed out a number of these same complaints, but one of the things I do want to touch on as well, which you all have probably, gosh, why is this thing so, Patek's site is kind of not what I like. Even Ben Clymer, who in this article that I have linked here, I'm going to call it a puff piece. And are we shocked? It's Hodinkee. They couldn't be critical if it would save two of their writers from drifting off to other places. So Ben basically doesn't, he calls it an open letter, but it might as well be called a love letter to Patek Philippe. And he's very transparent about it. Like, he got married in a Patek. He is on the altar of Patek. He was on the altar literally with Patek. But one of the things he even criticizes in this very long piece is this movement isn't even shaped. JLC shapes their movements. Why are they sticking around movement in a square watch? It doesn't make sense. Why not give it a square base plate? It's not like you have to reinvent the entire movement. But Patek gonna Patek, and they don't care. So while the decoration is very handsome on this movement, and I would love to have this movement. Like conceptually, like visually, this is right up there with a lot of other styles of movements that I would really like. I cannot help but feel like it looks cheap. It looks stupid to have this round circle cutout with this very handsomely decorated movement. And then on the other side, I've got square sapphire looking at a square watch with a square dial. So it's lazy. It's just lazy. Likewise, the integrated bracelet option. I don't care too much about this, but I'm going to ding it because I'm not clear if you can even swap it. I don't think they have alternate straps for it because it's an integrated style. Because again, they're cribbing straight from the Nautilus. The Santos would let you swap. The bracelet itself is fine, but this is not a new bracelet. We've talked about it's been talked about before when they rolled it out a few years ago for the Nautilus line. I don't know anyone who's had hands-on experience with it, so I can't really opine much about it. And then the last thing that I wanted to bring up is obviously the most popular one is going to be the all stainless steel one. It's in the green. Ben Clymer waxes on and on in his article about, the unobtainium, barely built green Nautilus. And so, hype, money. This is going to go for more second. And all three will probably go for more secondhand, at least initially. but 41,240 US dollars. So they've added what, $7,000 on top of the steel Nautilus for it to just be a square version of the same watch. So that's a complaint. And then the other thing I wanted to complain about, because I'm just going to be whining now, is the movements, both of them. But I'm going to stay focused on the 26-330 because that's the one in the approachable version. I cannot tell in the article, the Hodinkee article. Let me go to hack. Oh, I didn't mean the comments. There we go. Here's a section of this. I wasn't going to read this guy to you guys, but I want to zoom in on this if it will let me. There we go. Because I want you, if you have not read this part, and I hope I've blown it up, and let me see if I can blow it up a little bit more for you guys, because I know some people are reading on phones. Here's the thing. I saw this. Is this sarcasm? Because if I had written this paragraph, it would be sarcastic. But I'm not quite sure. The way it's done with the exclamation point, this means when you pull out the crown, the second hand stops. Sounds pretty freaking sarcastic to me. But later on, it comes up again like this was a big deal for Patek to finally do, is put hacking seconds in a watch. I know I'm in the little box. Let me do the big box. This is my face about you bragging about having hacking seconds. I do not care. I do not care that you choose to brag about it, because that's stupid. Because you should have hacking seconds at this point. In fact, the only time I expect non-hacking seconds is in dress watches. Every sports watch, I don't care if it's a generic sports watch or a dive watch or whatever, it should have hacking seconds. It's really not that hard, especially for the master of complications, Patek Philippe. So that this, again, I don't think this is sarcasm. I don't know if Ben can be sarcastic. I don't know him. So I truly do not know if he can be sarcastic or not. But this was brought up as like this major improvement. It is an improvement, but an improvement a child could do. It's just this little thing goes in and pushes against the balance. Like every Seiko now has that. Anyway, I'm just, it just, okay. I'm getting a little mad. And I shouldn't, because that's not Patek saying that. That's Ben at Hodinkee bragging about that. But holy crap, what a low bar if this is what we're going to pat ourselves on the back or pat others with their very expensive. So that's worth $6,000 more is what I'm asking for my 30-meter water resistance sports watch, which can finally hack. Golf clap. You can insert golf clap. I don't have the energy to golf clap for you. So it's stuff like that I'm just like, what the hell are we talking about here? This is absolutely goofy. Now, the complication version, I will get caught up with the chat. We will have a discussion. I'm getting my ramblies out of the way. All right. I want to praise the movement in part. And that was one of the things I was going to mention aside. I know I'm bouncing back and forth. The other thing I got on this, I think maybe I briefly mentioned it, but the 45-hour power reserve. What a joke. I get that this watch is thin. It's respectfully thin. Like as an integrated sports watch, they've checked my box here about getting this watch under the non-complicated version, under 9 millimeters thick. And they're not even using a micro rotor on it. So extra kudos for pulling that off. But honestly, 45 hours of power reserve in this day and age is pretty sad. It's very pretty sad. Like the whole point of most modern in-house movements that all the other brands are doing is increasing the power reserve time. Yes, it's a self-winding watch, but this is the point where you can't leave it off for the weekend because they didn't even get past the 48-hour mark. And that's always been been my biggest gripe with the old Solitas and the ETA 2824s and all the rest is the 38 hours of power reserve. You're telling me you couldn't even add 10 hours versus movements that came out in the 70s? I don't buy that it's because it's thin. Because we see plenty of other thin watches that are capable of having reasonable power reserves. They should have at least a 3-day power reserve, in my humble opinion. Bouncing to this one's movement. The movement and the complication is really cool in the sense that the snap over stuff is very well timed. So like the day snapping and the big date snapping. I love big dates. All those, I think, snap simultaneously within, I think it's less than 0.2 milliseconds or it's 2 milliseconds. So anyway, they got it really, really, really accurate. So kudos on that. However, A criticism I will point out, and we can kind of get a view of it from the side, is they still are using buttons to toggle our features. You can't do the setting through the crown. So they're using pushers. They're still using pushers. Who is it? Is it IWC that's done like all sorts of other brands are moving past doing pushers to toggle these things. And this is not a perpetual calendar. So it's not like these are going to only have to be seldomly used things. There are going to be times where you're going to want to do this. You can sort of see them on the sides there versus we bounce back to the less complicated, or as I've been calling it, the non-complicated version. And you can see the cleaner difference. Let me get to the other side versus what's going on here. If I'm highlighting the right parts of these watches, gosh, this carousel is kind of pokey. So you sort of see that. You can see where they've got them. So again, it's a cool movement, but it's old-fashioned. It's old-fashioned. And the last thing I want to say about this on the design, though, is, okay, I don't despise asymmetry. In the world of pinball, asymmetry is very, very important. Symmetrical playfields are inferior to asymmetrical playfields because if you memorize one side of a symmetrical playfield, you can play the other side exactly the same way. So you actually have less variety. In watches, we tend to like symmetry a lot. I like asymmetry if it follows a structure. And we can go into golden ratios and talk about the things like that have happened with the Patek Ellipse, which is not a watch I particularly care for, but looks better than this. Or, of course, things like the Longa 1, which I greatly admire, and everything in between. You know, I've seen different size subdials in sports watches. I'm thinking like the Breguet Type 20, or is it the Mark 20? I forget if it's a Type or a Mark, but you know what I mean. They got two different size subdials. I never liked it. It's too weird for me. But this, I mean, the placements I don't have an inherent problem with. But so we got two different size subdials in this blocky shape, and I don't care for it. And even if I could get past that, this subdial with the days of the week and the moon phase is big and the seconds is small, and I'm cool with that, I start to be less cool when it interrupts the rest of the flow. So you'll notice the hour markers, the applied hour markers, are all consistent up until we get to the 9 and the 3 o'clock position. Every single one of them on the lower half of the southern half, if you will, of this dial is a different size. They're all different. It doesn't mirror or anything. It's this. No other one of these 5 is like, or the 4 of these, of these 5 is this size and shape. And this one, it's not the same as this one. It's not the same as this one either. This one's smaller than all the rest. It's just under what like mathematical argument, like visually does this appeal to? And I will say it doesn't appeal to anything. It's not based off of any formula. It's made up. They just crammed it in there and thought, hey, this looks weird. I think they said, hey, it looks weird. Now, in their defense, I think almost all the complicated Nautilus are the same way, where the complications, they give it more life in a way, but I've never, again, it's a model I don't like, period. But the more complicated you make it, the less I've been able to get behind the design because I just find it disruptive. So I just find this disruptive. And despite the fact that the complication of the movement itself is quite cool. Okay, so that's what I wanted to start with in terms of talking about these watches. Let me go ahead and put the video back up. And now I've seen the chat has been flying along. I will now get caught up with the chat people. I thought I had the video back up. I guess I don't. All right, you're going to just look at a still photo. Sorry, guys. I can't be hunting around for this stuff. All right, let us see here. We've got Trap Vision kicking us off. Not interested in that expensive square. If I had to go luxury with a square design, Cartier is it. I had a Santos 100. That is a very big watch, which reminds me, I mentioned it at the start. 45. They're all 45 millimeters in diameter. If you've never handled, we're going to zoom in for this. If you've never handled a square watch before, please believe me when I tell you that 45 millimeters in a square is humongous. It is humongous. If you've ever looked at the 1921, Vacheron's 1921, their big one that's too big for a lot of people is like 41 millimeters. The Santos 100 was a big square. They wrapped it very well around the wrist, so it wore well, the one I had, but I did let it go because it was and I knew it was big, but when I had it, I was like, this is too big. I'm not going to keep this. This is way too big for a dress watch. And those were still on leather straps, so they were a little more dressy than some of the current ones. But again, 45 millimeters, guys, it's really big for a square. It's really big for a round watch, but square watches wear bigger than round watches for the same diameter. And the diameter of the 45 is the diagonal, the diagonal read on this. Otherwise, I think like flank to flank, it's 45 and a half. So, well, it doesn't have an obscene lug width, so it's not going to overhang because you're going to, obviously, it's going to be like 45 and a half there too. So it's very modest in that regard. It is going to have a massive wrist presence, though, massive wrist presence. And I don't think that's going to work for a lot of people. I mean, it depends on you. It depends on what you want to rock. It's always up to you. There's no real rule. People will give you guidelines, but there's no real rule on the size of a watch to wear. I would tell you not to wear anything with lugs overhanging, but if you want to get as close as possible before they overhang, I'm like, that's fine with me. But squares, big, strip that, I mean, they look so industrial at that point, is my view. We're also going to talk about, though, some things even more affordable than the Cartier as alternatives. Koji says Cubitus with a roundiest movement. Yes, again, just a big miss in my opinion. Why do this? Why be so lazy? It's $41,000, guys. It's thousands more than the steel Nautilus was. They are charged. It's not inflation. They're charging a premium. Was it to pay for the R&D? What effort, other than figuring out how to hack a movement, did they do? I don't care about the complicated one. They can charge whatever they want for that one. $41,000 for a Nautilus in a different case. Nautilus was overpriced anyway, but wow. Anyway, Scotty Pinball, welcome to the live stream, says, I'm guessing Dennis thinks these are okay. Sure, they're okay for me, because I won't be getting one. Trap Vision says, well, I'm sure San Martin will have the homage version available soon. In fact, there's been arguments that Patek has homaged someone else and not just their Nautilus, homaged a different brand with this. And we will touch on that watch. Pixel Punch says, it baffles me that there are extremely expensive watches out there without hacking. The water resistance on this one kills me. Now, Patek will argue, Pixel, that they are giving you true 30 meters water resistance. So you could actually go down to 30 meters. That's their thing that they're now doing, and they're advertising everything about is at that level. So, okay. You know, I believe them. I believe that they're capable of doing what they say that they're capable of doing. But that's not how anyone else advertises it. And so that's where I start to get, I'm going to turn off the sound here so then you can see the video of it. But I get, it's not how anyone else advertises water resistance. And Patek just doing its own thing. So much of everything, and there's a lot of pieces. There was an interview with some of the press people, including Ben Clymer with Hodinkee, met with Terry Stern with Patek, the CEO. And so much of this seems like stuff he just wanted. And this is not unusual for the Swiss watch industry in particular. Or let me be even more refined on it and say the luxury Swiss watch industry in particular, where they will tell you what you want. They feel that that's their role. And sometimes, though, I wonder how much at Patek, the CEO is the one making those calls and going around and saying, you know what? I want a square watch. Guys, chop, chop. Come and go make me one. And then that's what ends up happening. I don't know if that's true or not, but a lot of the stuff seems like he just thought it was cool. And so that's why they did it. That's my take. Matt, welcome to live stream. Matt, lazy design, and it's a Santalus. I like that. I like that name better than like the Cubitus. Pixel says laziest. Tony says squirtilus or Hoshilly. I'm for Hodinkee, I'm assuming. Pixel says, Portfolius Movementus. All right, the Latin guys, Latin. Yeah, why'd they name it Latin? All right, I don't. That's getting too whiny. But why? Why name it a Latin thing? I don't. Here, I'll let you guys look at the complicated one for a bit. Look at the one that's really expensive. Rob, thank you for being a 99-cent club member and welcome to the live stream, by the way. Looks like a Santos with ears. Yes, it does. And well, we're going to touch on a few alternative watches that they're not all going to look as close as some of them that you'll see in a moment. I have 5. I have this and I have 4 others to show you comparisons to. But if you like square shape, there's a lot in a big range of pricing that you can honestly consider. And all of them that I will show you are cheaper than this, if you could even get this, which is perhaps the saddest statement of the nature of our hobby, is the fact that regardless of what me, you, or anyone else thinks about this watch, it will sell out, at least initially. I don't know ultimately what Patek makes, 70,000 watches a year. And I think Thomas with the Escapement Show on the Watches Within Us Discord had posted that Mr. Stern had indicated that about 40% of them are sports watches at this point out of the catalog. So I don't know what fraction of that's going to be the Cubitus, but I guess we will end up seeing. Speaking of Thomas, welcome live stream. Really ugly in my opinion, but I think the Patek fanboys think that the brand image will pull the watch. I think it will help. Here's the thing that I'll throw as a question to all of you watching. And if you're not watching live, feel free to leave a comment on this. At what point is Patek not on the pedestal? Can they ever lose their pedestal? This comes up a lot with Rolex, but maybe the finger should be, and I get it. I was going to say, maybe the finger should be pointed at Patek. It makes more sense that Rolex would get more attention on it because they're making 1.2 million watches a year and a lot more people can obtain them. Like, not just literally like because there are more out there, but as in financially, they're within reach for a lot of people. Even if it's like a retirement dream watch, people can get the money together to get a Rolex. Getting the money together to get a Patek can be a different value proposition. Even if they had the money, the value proposition comes into play. It's like, do I want to spend this or do I want to buy like a Toyota? You know, like it's one of those things. So, but for a long time, people, myself included, have never argued that Patek shouldn't be in the Holy Trinity. We've done these things before on live streams where we've debated who should be in and out of the Holy Trinity. And I don't think I've ever had anyone that I've had on as a panelist or even recall seeing anyone in a chat argue that Patek shouldn't be in the Holy Trinity. And I'm not going to go that far because they can still, as this watch on the screen shows, they can still deliver a very impressive set of complications. They are very good at complications, especially for what is a mass-produced brand. They are very, very skilled. However, their design language is completely antiquated, and this didn't help anything. I dislike almost the entire Patek catalog. And I wasn't going to do this as an aside, but now I'm going to jump into it. So if we look at these collections just up on the screen, and I need to put them back on the screen, sorry, so I like some of the watches that are in these 3. This is about it. And not even the ones you see briefly here on the screen. Like, I like some Calatravas, and I like the dial configurations and designs of some of the complication and grand complications. I don't like the golden ellipse. I don't care for the gondola. I don't hate it. I don't like the Aquanaut. I don't like the Nautilus. The Aquanaut used to be a Nautilus until it got its own name. I don't care for the Cubitus. The 24 is a ladies' watch line, and I'm not a pocket watch person. So it's like 3, and I don't even like all of them. You go into Calatrava, and you start getting stuff like, okay, this is all right. This is a little weird. This is okay. And then, oh, look, stuff that looks the Vacheron, like the Vacheron Traditionnel. I like those there. So I like 5 of them. But the one thing that I feel is true for pretty much any Patek is they look very fuddy-duddy, very old-fashioned, and not like in that elegant Breguet way. It works for a dress watch, but when we start talking about stuff like this, and because they chose to copy the Nautilus so closely, it feels like this is trying to be out of the 70s but modernized. And I bring it up, well, in part because of the brand image question that Thomas presented, but also because the argument has been Patek is trying to appeal to a younger buyer. Somebody tell me how squaring off the Nautilus makes it appeal to young people. It's the same watch. Where's the meme of the woman who's got the two pictures and it's the same picture? It's the same picture. It's just in a Santos case. It's the same watch. I don't understand how young people, if the young people like the Nautilus, they might like this. But if they don't like the Nautilus, they're not going to like this. This isn't modern. This doesn't feel modern at all. This is not a new shape. This shape has been around a long time. Cartier has been doing, it's been like a decade since they retired the Santos 100s and have the modern Santos cases. And this is like those, but less elegant because they got the stupid ears on them. Stupid flanky ears because they had to keep it a Nautilus, but not call it a Nautilus, just like the Aquanaut is a Nautilus wannabe. Because they've got, here's what I'm going to argue. Patek is a one trick. They just act like they aren't. And they really only have one hot watch. It's the Nautilus. And everything else is a Nautilus derivative. It's the same thing with when people with Vacheron cried out for the 222 and steel to come back. And Vacheron's been reluctant. And part of the reluctance is the Overseas is just a modernized 222. So they don't get it. They're like, why do you want the 222? We gave you a modern version. It's called the Overseas. Shut up and buy it. But you know, we see the gold version of the 222 and people like it better, including myself. So this is one of those things. Thomas continues, I hope they are wrong because that means Patek and Rolex can do whatever they want. And there are near enough suckers that buy that crap, that buy their crap at the end of the day. There probably are, though. There are a lot of people that, I mean, just go read Ben's article on Hodinkee. Like, I'm sure he's getting one of these. But he doesn't make any bones about it in this article about talking about like what it conveys. And it's not just that you have the money, but you also have the access and the money. And some people, their desire for watches is driven entirely by status. I like a variety of watches. I like some very expensive watches. I hope nobody who encounters me thinks I'm wearing my watch because of anyone that I happen to wear and thinking that I'm trying to do it because I'm proving something about my value, because I don't have anything to prove to any of these people, including you guys, quite frankly. But do join the 99% Club anyway. But that's not the point why I wear watches. I wear watches because I enjoy those watches and I think they're interesting. And I have a variety of price points because I think they are interesting at a variety of price points. But I have never mentally been able to, maybe if I had grown up rich, I would have felt differently. Or if I was a venture capitalist or, you know, someone that went in that field and that was a sign of success, was you used money as a sign of success. I did get my first Rolex as a sign of success in my career. I got a used one and it was unpopular. And, you know, I only ever have had like 2 people identify that it even was a Rolex. But that was to say something to myself about my own success, not to project it. So I've never understood the value of projection. Because it seems like you're very, and just as personal opinion, I don't mean to offend anyone, but it seems like you're very insecure. You have to be driven by projecting to other people to get them to think a certain way about you. But this is not psychologies with Dennis. This is watches with Dennis. Tony says, I honestly think that at this point, Patek and Rolex can do whatever they want and people will worship at the altar. You may be right. Market's cooling though, or that's what they keep saying. Thomas says, the amount of lookalikes I've spotted similar to this new Cubitus is getting daft. It just goes to show that Patek needs to stick with traditional designs or get a new design team in. And Koji says, the new calendar composition costs $88,000, but it's only a double calendar, not even annual. Still needs 5 adjustments every year. Look, Koji, what do you want for sub 6 figures? That would be my answer to you if I worked for Patek. And it reminds me that I think I brought it up last week with that interview on the Superlative podcast with the reporter from India and her explaining when she asked Thierry Stern why they weren't anywhere in India. And his response was, if an Indian wants to buy a watch, it's a paraphrase, they could just fly to Dubai and buy it, which is both true and insulting. But I guess that's their way. When you're at the top of the pyramid, I guess you get to be an a-hole to whoever you want. Pixel says, do they even have a design team, or is it just some guy who's like, let's make it a square and then applauds himself? You know, I assume they have a team that considers themselves designers, but I also wonder how much of it is Thierry Stern going in and getting whatever he wants. Matt says, it's so ugly, I still believe it's a huge fake. No, it's real. We're on Patek.com now. boys and girls. This is real, real, real. Hey, look, it's got lume. All right. I didn't show you the lume photo, so I'm sure you're all on board now. Trap Vision says, it's a guarantee that people will still buy it just because it's something new from one of the holy ones. Sure. That said, I mean, how much? Let's remember when AP came out with the code 1159, and it did not. Now, let me say this. I liked the code 1159 at launch better than this. A lot of people did not like the code 1159. The code 1159 has gotten more popular lately, but only the complicated ones, like the star wheels and stuff. It's not the time only ones. People still don't really want code 1159s. They get stuck having to buy them because that's how you get on the path to getting a Royal Oak. But so in this case, I think there was some discussion about this in entry level. This is not going to be entry level. The price isn't even entry level. I don't mean like in the grand scheme that $41,000 watches can't count as entry level. It can in your weird Richie rich world. It can. Here's the thing. That's not the cheapest watch that they've got. And I don't mean the ladies' watches either. The Calatrava line is the entry level line. These Calatravas are a lot cheaper. Even though they are in gold, they are going to be cheaper. So here you go, $33,110 for the Calatravas driven by the 6119R gold version watch. Obviously not on a gold bracelet, but that's what? That's almost $10,000 less, $8,000 less than this stainless steel thing with hacking. Don't forget the hacking that they've got on this now. So when people talk about this being an entry level Patek, I'm like, no, it's almost 10 grand on top of the Calatrava is your most affordable way into the Patek, which is great in the regards that it's also one of their better looking watches. So kind of win-win for you if you're really into Patek. And Calatravas go for less used than they go for new. They don't fall like Vacherons do, but they do go for less. So this, you could maybe try and argue this is the entry level sports watch. But if you've ever browsed Patek's catalog, you know that's a bunch of crap too, because there's the Aquanaut. So let's just grab one of these. Here's the stainless steel Aquanaut. Now let me grab one on bracelet. Let's be more fair. Grab this on bracelet. How much is it? $28,000, even less than the Calatrava. The Cubitus will never be entry level. So whoever people, there have been a few pushing this narrative. That narrative is BS. It's not priced as entry level. It's significant. It's 5 figures more than other comparable versions of a watch from Patek with the same water resistance. I think this is a very ugly watch personally, so I wouldn't get it. I think I might actually like the Cubitus more than the Aquanaut, quite frankly, but we won't dive into that because I think you'll all immediately unsubscribe if I were to say that. So I won't admit it. But moving on. Joel, by the way, Joel Bolt, welcome to live stream. The titanium model is definitely my least favorite of the 3. I don't believe any of them are titanium. I believe you get 3 choices. You get stainless steel, which is the one we've been looking at with the green dial. You have this complications in platinum, and this is actually stainless steel and rose gold. I'll put it on the screen for a while because we didn't really talk about it. But yeah, so it's a two-tone. You know, because the hip kids today want the style that was big in the 90s, two-tone. Thomas says, there are several cheap quartz fashion watches that have tweaked the Santos design and ended up looking like this. Patek's designers must surely have known about this. Depends how insular they are. Thomas says, 45 millimeter equals Patek does Panerai. That would be a very good name for an adult video. Stona, welcome to the live stream. Ditching those side bulges would greatly improve the wearability and looks of this. I completely agree with you, but then I think you even more look like a Santos. And I would want you to, because the Santos is a very attractive watch, and this is not, this is not like the ugliest thing I've ever seen. A lot of people online have been reacting very viscerally, and that's fine. We all have our own takes. This is not like disgusting. Like I wouldn't, if I owned one of these, would I wear it? I mean, yeah, I would probably, not a lot, but it's okay. Not the complication one though. That one's, I don't like it at all. This, it's just when I know what it's coming from, it doesn't seem very creative. But when you look at this and you're like, what would I fix about it? There's all sorts of stuff that stands out that I would fix. I wouldn't have the same dial texture, the horizontal stripes. I definitely wouldn't have the ears on the sides of the case, those side bulges, as Stoner referred to them, on the flanks. Those, all of a sudden, those two changes make this, but all we've done is turn it into the Santos. And I've thought about getting the Santos, not the big one I used to have, but a normal size one. Underachieving watch collector, welcome to live stream. Patek Cubitus. It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see how this works out for him. I wish I could pull my knee up enough to get it in frame to be just like the dodgeball scene there for that. Stona says, Squatilus. I like the names. The names are getting clever. Brand Headlights, welcome to live stream. For some, it may be so ugly is beautiful. Sure. And some people like ugly watches. We've seen a whole lot of ugly watches come out this year. I still haven't done that video to celebrate all of the ugly watches. This one might be an honorable mention, but honestly, this is not remotely ugly enough, I think, to make the list. I don't find it attractive. Stona says, Fuddy Dudleyus. That's going with mine. Yeah, they are. It's a fuddy-duddy brand. Scotty says, blood pressure rising. No, be calm, be calm. Like me. Matt says, looks also like the new G-Shocks in steel. I've seen some comparisons to the G-Shocks. I don't have that one to show as a comparison for us today. Sky says, it does look like the 4K G-Shock. Thomas says, agree. I like the Code 1159 much more than this on release. It looked different. The thing is, the Code 1159 is like, it doesn't know what it wants to be at first. They seem to be, if they drift the Code 1159, Audemars Piguet could use it as a complication watch. It's in this weird realm where it feels like a fashion watch because it's got elements of a dress watch and elements of a sports watch, and they're not blending all that well for a lot of people, but everyone's mileage will vary. David S. says, I don't mind the design all that much, but the 45 millimeter size just makes no sense to me. Is Patek making a statement that we are heading back toward bigger watches again? I think they're making a statement that they think younger people prefer bigger watches, but I don't know what they've based it on. I do think the trend of watches continuing to get smaller has stopped personally. And I do think we will either hold or we will see, it's a pendulum, right? So I don't want to say that big watches will never come back into play. I'm very skeptical that 45 millimeter watches are ever going to become a norm in any foreseeable future. But even in the big era, the Panerai era, the 2000 to 2010, squares being huge were not done a lot. Again, Santos 100, I do have to bear that one in mind. That was a chonker of a watch. But again, I don't even know if at the time it sold all that well for Cartier. But so it's tough to say, David. But I can see where some people would. Again, actually, I'd say the two-tone, but I'm old, might be the best looking of the two. I normally like green dials a lot, but I don't know. It provides some contrast to the bracelet being that way. So that's kind of where I'm thinking. But the green one's going to be the one that a lot of people are going to want. Pre-2, welcome to live stream. Giving postage stamp from AliExpress. Oh, is that the vibe you're getting? If someone told me this was a Daniel Wellington, I would believe you. The finishing is too good. I would never believe you once I saw the back that it was a Daniel Wellington. But there's a variety of things I could believe that it would be. Now, I want you guys to praise me for this because I went to the effort to mock up this very bad image. Don't worry, I have the websites loaded for all of these. But so everyone's been talking about what this looks like. And I think it's very obvious. And here's if you couldn't see it, the Patek is here in the center. That they've taken the Nautilus and I would describe it as Santos-fied it, but they've squared it off basically. But there are 4 other watches that came to my mind. Well, 3 came to my mind and 1 I was told. So when I was over at on the Watch Crunch forum app, the Mon Manhattan was the number one thing I saw a lot of people point out. In fact, Mon has already started doing ads on their social media suggesting that Patek cribbed from them to do this Cubitus style watch. And it's interesting because we'll go to each of them. I actually don't like the Mon very much. There's some aspects of it I like better than the Patek. There's some aspects that I actually like the Patek better than the Mon on, but I can definitely see why they get the vibe for it. The difference is when I look at the Mon, I don't feel like it's a Nautilus, but it's got some of the most, it's because the bezel shape is different. It's not perfectly squared off. We'll hit on it, but we'll talk about that one. It's actually of all of these watches I've got on the screen, it's the most affordable. Then there's the Glashütte Original 70s. Now, their current lineup is all chronographs, but there are non-chronograph versions of it. But the shape itself, when I saw the Cubitus, it was the second watch I thought of. The first watch I thought of course, was the Cartier Santos de Cartier. You can even get one in a more attractive green dial than Patek's green. I think Patek's green's a little too much like grass, but of course I am biased towards sunburst anyway. So the Cartier Santos, of course, you've got the industrial look with the screws, but that's its own unique take. You do have the texturing that you see with the case shape because the bezel, this is a render, so it looks a little flatter than it really plays out. But I think it pulls what it wants to do off far better than the flanges on the side of the Nautilus. The Nautilus as well, but the Cubitus. But it is an option. And then there's Mito. Mito's Multifort TV. Again, the shape itself is a little more deviant. It kind of reminds me of when people will compare the Polo S to the Nautilus, and there's certain shape aspects that are fairly different on the Polo, but there's a lot that feels inspired. But especially if you happen to like the Cubitus, that was the complication that had the big date up here at the 12, the Mito has that. So we will go ahead and we will dive into these. I'm going to catch up with the chat really quick because there are just a few comments. Koji says, honestly, I prefer the Mon. I think a lot of people might. Pixel says, the Cartier is by far the most attractive to me, followed by the Mon. Brand Headlight says, I like the new design of the rotor. I do like the new design of the rotor. For the Patek, yes, it is. The finishing on the movement is very good. And Trapfish says at $88,000 price tag, I'd want something that knocks my socks off, leaving me with a black eye. Honestly, it's not a bad looking watch, but it doesn't stand out amongst the competition. And I think a large part of that is because it's too much like their prior watch. If you're launching, here's the dentist pro tip. I'm not in a position to give you pro tips, much less Patek pro tips, but I'm going to give a pro tip anyway. So pro tip. If you are going to launch a new model line, in most instances, do not have it look like an existing model line. I say most instances because, case in point, it was very smart for Vacheron to release the 222, even though it looks a lot like the Overseas. But the reason it looks like the Overseas was the Overseas is the replacement for the 222. And Vacheron was bringing back a vintage catalog favorite. So there was a reason to go ahead and allow the 222 to exist alongside solid gold versions of the Overseas. But again, going back as we are to Patek and looking at their collection, Cubitus, Nautilus, Aquanaut. And I've always wondered why the Aquanaut is its own thing because it looks so samey to me to the Nautilus. And then I've read that, no, it used to actually be in the Nautilus line. They broke it out. So again, we joke about all the time about how Rolex is, excuse me, not Rolex, I apologize. Audemars Piguet is the Royal Oak company because almost, other than the code 1159, like everything, like they've got the concept Royal Oaks, they got the Overseas Royal Oaks, they got the regular almost all their model lines are Royal Oak. But honestly, how much better is Patek? We've acted like, and myself included, have acted like Patek is better than this. And they are on the numbers, but in reality, even though they don't name them the same, Cubitus, Nautilus, and Aquanaut are all in the Nautilus line. They are all flavors of the Nautilus. They are only saved from being a full caricature because they still have things like their Grand Complications. These two are basically the same thing, Complication and Grand Complication. Dial designs are very similar. Calatrava line is its own thing. The Gondola is its own thing. And Golden Lips is its own thing. And no one cares about pocket watches. So they have not gone full AP. They are closer than Mr. Stern thinks they are, though. They're a lot closer than he thinks they are. He just can't bring himself to admit it. So we have all of these. And let's start with the Mon. It was the one I was not familiar with. Now, this is the most affordable one of these four comparisons that I have for you. It's around $1,000. Yep. So these are all just under €1,000. Ultra thin. These are under 10 millimeters thick. They have a Manhattan 37, which didn't go with the micro rotor, and they are thicker, maybe easier to get a hold of. Wearable size, the 39 is because of the sizing. It's 39 millimeter case. It's 7 millimeters thick, by the way. It's technically 6.9 millimeters thick. That's thinner than what Patek is giving you. So you've got that going for it. And I don't know much about them other than a lot of people have been talking about them, and they've got their own design language. You get the horizontal line. So immediately it's not going to look like a Nautilus because the striping is completely different. But you have indices that seem to make more sense. The bezel is a unique shape. They didn't just square it off. And I think this bezel shape goes along with the flanks of the case that they've chosen to do, which could look Nautilus-esque, but the bezel makes it work better. I do not like this shape. Like I would not buy this, but if you like that style of shape, you might like this more than the Cubitus. So I wanted to present it. A lot of people have feel the Cubitus saw this and was like, hold my beer. We'll put in a fancier movement than an ETA 7001. And so that's what Patek did. So that's one option. That's the cheapest option. You want to spend more, then there's this. Now, again, all the new ones, they're all in kind of bright colors. These 70s models from Glashütte Original, underappreciated brand. But again, you get the square shape. You got pushers that actually do something besides make you have to toggle stupid settings on your watch 5 times a year. This is a limited edition model, which is why, in part, it's $16,000 for a steel watch. But it is a chronograph, and it's still, what, near on $25,000 less than the Cubitus is. Not as much of the same look, but you still have somewhat of the same case vibe without the same flanking. It doesn't quite have that flange, but this sort of TV-esque shape, I feel, matches up competitively quite well with what we see. That, again, it's not a copy. It's clear that Patek didn't look at the GO for any inspiration whatsoever. But you might like, if you like this general shape, but don't like certain things that Patek did with it, or don't like the price, that could be an option. We'd be go and take a look at GO, especially look for some of the non-chronos. You might like them better. They're not in the current catalog. You'll have to buy used. The clearest competitor is the Santos de Cartier. These are very popular sports watches. They're under $7,800 new, so way cheaper. A design that is not like it. No one accuses Cartier of having they have a real design team. No one accuses Cartier of copying anything. The Santos has been around for a very long time, so they iterate and they do all sorts of different flavors of things. Yes, the closed case back. Yes, the movement isn't particularly interesting in and of itself, but you get 100 meters of water resistance. And I wanted, for some reason, it's not holding when I'll have to hold my mouse down, I guess. But one of the things you can see with the, a little bit, if you've blown up here, or if you have a big enough screen, there is some, there's some depth to it. So that's only the part where the text is really resting on the wrist. They do some curving, and they have a nice little release system so you can change up stuff on the biggest complaint I ever hear about the Santos watches is the bezels scratch pretty bad, but these are not the polished bezel versions. At least this one isn't. This is brushed, so it should even be better than a lot of the dressier ones that we talk about sometimes. So this would be my pick. Again, you're well under 5 figures still. Not to mention you can find these used, especially you want other colors, other dial colors. You can find these used all over the place. So Santos would be an option if you want a luxury alternative. And then I want to go ahead and mention Mito really quick. So I've never owned a Mito. These are a little under 1,300 new. Wouldn't be too surprised you could find them used for under $1,000. Again, it's got its own unique thing going on. I like how their hour markers, obviously it doesn't have the same level of finishing. You do have the horizontal striping, much like what we would have in the Patek, except with the Patek, you've got the Nautilus style, very large striping. This is much more subtle. Again, it looks almost like static on a TV screen, except they are actually horizontally applied. It's not just a random pattern. So I think this actually, it's not going to be, no one's going to think you were trying to have a Nautilus or a Cubitus with this. You get a big date. So if you want that complication, that would be reason alone to probably go ahead and accept a $1,000 price point. And all the rest of it, again, I just think the case looks better overall. Like, I would be interested in this style of shape. I would be interested in the 70s style shape. I like the Santos a lot. Manhattan doesn't really work for me, but it definitely appears way more unique than this thing. So anyway, those are the comparisons I wanted to give you guys as alternative. There have been so many others that people have listed. There are a lot of square watches out there, and it's almost impossible for something this generic. And that's maybe that's the biggest gripe that I would have with the Cubitus is it's really generic. And we can't criticize them from stealing from them. So, well, we can, but so everything about it is Nautilus or just like generic square. And yes, if we go over and we go back to the full collection and we choose the complicated version, that stance just changed. But as like Koji pointed out, it's not even an annual calendar watch. It's super expensive. So $88,000 for a movement that they mastered the ability for it to, and we can see about playing. I might have to mute this one too. Yeah. But to see like the snap and stuff of how it works, how it functions, but it's not a fancy calendar, and you still have recessed toggles to set the stuff where you need a toothpick, and or they'll give you a tool, but I always used a toothpick when I had a watch like that. So with all of these different aspects of it. So, I mean, it's just technologically, it's kind of sad, really. And, minuscule power reserves, movements that aren't even shaped to the case. I mean, JLC does that. I know JLC's prices have gone up a lot lately, but it's still, you can get, display case back reversos, duo faces, and all the rest of it well under even the simplest Cubitus at retail. It's just, and I'm going to go ahead and ding them for the fact that this $88,000 version doesn't even come on a bracelet. They put it on a stupid strap. So I don't know if the strap's truly stupid. I'm going to judge it. They put everything else on a bracelet. They could have probably put it on a steel bracelet and then let the rest of the watch itself be platinum and gotten away with it. But they didn't even do that. So, all right. So getting caught up with the chat. Pre2 says only Rolex can get away with that. Oh yes, it was so far back. It was probably the sales stuff. I don't remember exactly what we were talking about though, so I apologize. Koji says, speaking of Vacheron Constantin, there's an early 80s version of the 222 that's square and much better than the Borg cube, in my opinion. I have seen the square versions of it. Not my favorite style, but yeah, Vacheron did a lot more of the 222s than people realize. All anyone wants though is the round overseas looking one in steel. That's what they want. Brand Headlight says the Manhattan looks to me like a Vacheron Constantin Royal Eagle. Oh, that's interesting. I'm going to put that one back up so people can. Unfortunately, there aren't a lot of photos of it. I think this is like in pre-order or something. So, oh no, there's some more down here. Look, they even striped the movement. Tudor, pay attention to this. And you get 100 meters water resistance. Okay. I like the back of this one a lot. This looks pretty nice. And there's the texture here is Cote de Genève, the dials is, I've seen a couple brands starting to do that now. Not my favorite thing in the world, but it is a different look. And it's interesting because you can see with the detail, because of that, there's actually almost some brushing off to the side. So the lines are vertical, but the pattern upon them is not. Whereas this is just, it looks, I mean, when I see that, and this is probably one of the things I just don't like about the Nautilus in general, and it's just as true for the Cubitus, is these dials, they look super stamped to me. Like the same stamp that Tissot uses stamped. And at Tissot pricing, I'm all in favor of stamped. But like this does not look machine guilloche to me. Definitely isn't manually guilloche. Rolex would guilloche their 1908s. Yes, they use a robot to do it, but it's an actual carving. It's not just a stamped press. I've never liked these horizontal lines. I know some people are really into the Nautilus. So bear that in mind as part of my things that I'm just not feeling the Cubitus is, it reminds me too much of the Nautilus, and that's not a watch I want to be reminded of. David, thank you for being a 99 Club member, by the way, David. And if I haven't greeted you, welcome to the live stream. 60% of Patek's volume is non-sports. Meanwhile, the code 1159 is less than 15% of Audemars Piguet's volume. I'm harsh to Patek over the Cubitus, but they're nowhere near being the Nautilus company. That is true. And I showed their full collection setup, but this is one step closer than they were before. They act like the Nautilus is the only Nautilus. That's not entirely being fair, though. The Aquanaut is just the flavor of a Nautilus. And you can argue that I'm wrong on that, but given that it used to be one, I feel that it's okay for me to say that. So that's still pretty distant when it was, as a percentage, we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 lines. But now they're 10 lines but it's just another iteration off of the Nautilus. So their percentage of Nautili has gone up in the way I'm doing the assessment. You are absolutely correct, though. They are not remotely near Audemars Piguet, both in number of lines and, as you have pointed out in your comment, which I'll put back up on the screen, nor in the mathematics of sales. And Thomas had touched on this in the Watches with Dennis Discord, which if anyone wants to be in that, there's a link in the videos. There's no cost or anything. You can just join it, and we just write about watches. He pointed out that whole thing about that only 40% of the Patek sales have been the sports watch lineup. So they have definitely done a lot better job than keeping the balance. I'm looking and I'm going, it looks like they're drifting in this. And we all have our own tastes. So here's my thought. I totally understand the new model line, especially if they want to appeal to a younger crowd. It needs to be a sports watch. It didn't need to take anything from the Nautilus, though. That's what I think. It's Patek Philippe. Do something different. They have such creative watches in some of their other concepts. And it's some of that stuff I hate. Some of the stuff is too fuddy-duddy for me. But I don't know. It could have been a square watch without any horizontal striping. Now go to step one. That's kind of where I'm at. It's like they could have done something interesting in that regard. Or they have some things that they're doing in their lineup, like I'll throw it back up here. So their Calatrava collection, it's getting a little bloated. I don't mean like in too many SKUs. They keep their SKUs really tight. That's another thing that I'm not quite sure AP does a very good job on. But like these, I don't really care much for these. I like the little guilloche center pattern and stuff, but these are like Calatravas that are racing inspired, and they don't look like Calatrava is like a super simple dress watch. At least that's my stereotype of it. This is like a Calatrava trying to appeal to a younger crowd. Why not do something round and like racing inspired, but not a Calatrava, its own thing? Why couldn't that be the new line, the new 25-year line that they came out with? I actually like this effort a lot better than the Cubitus, but that's because I like some of the Calatrava concepts better. But when you look at this, what is it that's Calatrava? It's time plus date. Well, the Nautilus is time plus date. I mean, everything's time plus date. They got this racing track around the edge. The colors aren't conservative. It could lead its way into its own thing. And they could have been bolder than this if they did their own line. That's kind of where I'm at, where I'm just curious. Like this reminds me of, what is it? The VC was their entry level, the 56 or whatever. That's what this dial reminds me of. And I think that's a really nice looking watch from Vacheron. And if this had a color match date window, I'd have probably been a lot more tolerant of it. But it just doesn't seem like this is a Calatrava, but this might be the direction that works for them. When I look at Patek, what I see, and maybe I'm wrong on it, but what I see is that Steve Buscemi Saturday Night Live skit where he's like, "Hey, fellow kids," and he's carrying the skateboard. They can't appeal to youth because they aren't young. I'm not young. I can't tell you how to appeal to youth either. You have to ask youth. And we see so many luxury brands. It's not just a Patek problem. So many luxury brands are struggling with this. We cannot, lest we ever forget the stupid dead girl in a lawn chair. I have a whole shirt in my shop that I sell making fun of Audemars Piguet's, what is it, the Alex watch. I'm typing it up. We're gonna find it to remind you, because I can never let this go. This as an example of an attempt to appeal to youth. One of the worst looking watches. Now, the Cubitus is so much better than this. One of the worst looking watches I have ever seen. Like you thought you didn't like the Trump watch, but look at this ad campaign that they did. So dead girl in a lawn chair wearing a watch because youth want to be dead in a cheap plastic chair wearing a what? $60,000. I don't remember how much that version was. A chronograph that you can't tell the time of. And my second favorite advertising photo was the one with the key ring, which I probably should just have gone right to and let you see, because I know they've got it in this article. Here you go. Because you know what you do when you're rich and you're young? You hang your solid gold watch on a set of steel keys on a net, a tiny net. And a tiny net is a death sentence. So my point here is they do not know. The Holy Trinity, they do not know what they're doing. They don't know what they're doing with appealing to youth. This is This is some stupid level stuff. It's still my favorite ad campaign ever because it is so out of touch. It's I may not be young anymore, but I'm like, I've seen kids going around. They are not like, gosh, I sure wish I had a watch to hang my set of keys on while I'm dead in the launch. Like, nobody does that. It's stupid. It's just like losing the plot and just grasping at straws. It's very, very sad. So anyway, enough of that. Now I'm muling about AP too much. David adds, the Cubitus should not have been a Nautilus variant. It needed its own dial texture and its own bracelet, and also needs to be smaller. Other than that, it's a home run. Yes, I would agree. The size, a few of you in the chat have really pointed that out, and I maybe haven't stressed it enough. 45 millimeter. I tried to at the beginning of the live stream. 45 millimeters is humongous for a square. I have no idea why they picked it to be that big. And one of the things about that's a really good point, David, is it shines through in other ways than just the fact that the watch is going to occupy so much wrist presence. Let us not forget this movement. Look at how much dead space is in that. Setting aside that they didn't shape it, that movement is small. That movement is very small for that case. And there's a reason why the 36.5, in my opinion, 36.5 millimeter 1921 for Vacheron looks better, especially from the back, in particular from the back, than the 41 or 40 millimeter version that they first came out with. They use the same movement. So the 36.1, the movement fills the case back. It just looks more refined. This is Patek Philippe. That they didn't shape it was bad enough. That it's not, don't get me wrong, this is not obscenely too small, but there obviously is a lot of freaking dead space here that is not being used by this movement. And it shows. It shines through. So Trap Vision says, I'm not too familiar with Bell & Ross, but I'm considering it for a future purchase in 2025. I mentioned this brand in on another channel, and some people pulled out dinner forks and tiki torches. Bell & Ross is a pretty respected brand. They're, of course, mostly known for their square watches. They do have some round ones. Their square style has never really appealed to me. So it's not a brand I've talked about very much. I thought it had some decent supporters, but I can't really add much about it. I'll occasionally cover a new release from Bell & Ross, but it's never, not even their round watch. It's just never been a brand that had anything that really drew me in. So, but I think there's some good potential for stuff that you might like out of it. Junior says, I kind of like the Cubitus. I kind of like it too. Like, I don't hate everything about it, but as has been pointed out, a lot of that is because I like the Santos. And so when I see Santos, there's so much about, I like square watches. I forget I can't hold down, I have to hold down the mouse on this side to let you see this. I like square watches. I don't own any anymore, but I do like, certain square watches, like the Tag Heuer Monaco doesn't appeal to me, for example. But the Santos does, and I did have a Santos at one point. So there are aspects of the Cubitus that I like, but I do not like that it looks so much like a corruption of the Nautilus. For me, it wasn't the right decision in any way, shape, or form. It was like they were too scared to deviate from the Nautilus, and so it is exceedingly derivative. And some of the aspects that, with me, again, reminding everyone, because I want you to fully know my biases, I don't like the Nautilus. I don't like the shape of the Nautilus. I do not like the aesthetic of the Nautilus. But there are things that we see on the Cubitus that are straight up from the Nautilus that made sense when you were doing the porthole look of the Nautilus that do not make sense anymore, but they're still here. But it's not a porthole, that's a square now. So why is it still here? It's because they want you to have the member berries and go member berry the Nautilus. Well, here's the Cubitus. But like, it's not a total fail on the design front. This is not an ugly watch. The complicated one, kind of. I mean, if I were to do my top 5 ugly watches of 2024, this watch wouldn't make the list. It's just not ugly enough. But it is so derivative that I'm going to say it would be in the running to be number 1 for worst collection of the year, because who wants to wait 25 years to see what looked like took 12 weeks to come up with? I'm being pretty generous, but I figured they had to figure out a way to put the push buttons in on their stupid movement that you have to change 5 times a year on the complicated one. So I got rounded up a little bit. Let's see. Thomas with the Escapement Show says, I visited the Bell & Ross stand at Watches and Wonders the past 2 years, and they have some interesting stuff. People like to hate them because they have a case design, a bit like Panerai. Yeah, Panerai's a little too big. I stereotype, a little too big for me. I've tried on some Panerais though, but I don't ever see myself owning a Panerai either. But yeah, you see a lot of that. But Panerais, of course, they have that cult following. So just one of those things. Koji says that still cracks me up. I think we were talking about the dead watch girl, obviously. Yes. And you got my AP rant. Yes, I can't help it, guys. This ad campaign, I'm not gonna tell you to buy the shirts that I have I'm sure I've got an auto link to this. But again, so you could see, please note, this screams so much old guys trying to appeal to youth, and they don't know how, so they just hired a bunch of models. But why male models? Sorry, Zoolander reference. And here we'll stick them in, and only one gets to wear the watch, and it's just there with a bunch of, what do kids wear? T-shirts? Yeah, let's give them T-shirts. What about jeans? Do they still like that denim stuff? Yeah. Hey, you know what? This is a great idea. And then it feels like Patek looked at him and goes, hey, you know what would be great if we took an alligator strap and made it look like denim. So that way it's expensive, but it looks cheap because that's what kids want. So maybe Patek did crib from some others, but not Bell & Ross, most likely. Yeah, just one of those things. I just don't get it. Aussie expat watches. Welcome to live stream, by the way. Yes, besides everything, Cubitus is amazing. Well, I mean, I was gonna say the shapes, the bracelet, but the bracelet's straight up from the Nautilus. The movement decoration's nice. It's too bad it's not shaped, but I mean, got Côte de Genève. They matched the striping on the rotor. I mean, there's some stuff. The proportions for being 45 millimeter seem balanced. It wouldn't be on my list. It wouldn't be on my list. But like, I don't see this and just go, bleh. Nothing about it looks that off to me. It's just, I see where how I've criticized like Christopher Ward the 12, and just where it feels like they took a Chapek baseline. I think the designer may have worked on the Chapek Antarctique, so it made sense. And then they took 11 other integrated sports watches concepts and threw them all in, and that's why you got the 12. It's because it's 12 different ideas glued together. It's kind of like that, except they cribbed straight up from the Nautilus for like 80% of it, and then threw it in a Santos case, but then glued on the flank ears so that it was even more Nautilus-y, because they want the people to buy it who love the Nautilus. Is this supposed to be a shorter list than the Nautilus? Because I don't think so. But I have no idea how Patek sells stuff. It's just not my thing. Escapement says, I visited. Oh, I already talked about that one. Sorry. Dr. LK. Welcome to live stream. By the way, I know I haven't greeted you. Yesterday, I was in a talk with Jean-Claude Biver, and he told us that he thinks this is going to be a success, especially since now there's a lot of pushback. I personally don't like it. Well, Biver is an expert marketer, and Patek is Patek. And we had a little conversation about that. I think it's going to be successful. I mean, honestly, I do. Patek makes so few. Yes, it's 70,000 watches. They are an industrial player. They make a lot of watches. But as David noted earlier, they only make about 40% of the line is sports watch. The Cubitus I don't think they're going to change the proportions on it. So the Cubitus is going to suck away Nautilus and Aquanaut construction. And there will be a certain number of these, but the same net total of sports watch is probably going to exist. And with now that the 5711's been retired and the closest thing to it is a white gold model, people will gravitate to this, the one on the screen in particular, because it's stainless steel, and they're going to go this route. Especially if they really like the Nautilus, and maybe they hope that helps build the brand rep and they can get it, and they didn't like the Aquanaut is too creative of an interpretation of the Nautilus to go with the Aquanaut, or they want the better spin history, but maybe they have to buy a Calatrava to buy the Aquanaut so they can buy the Cubitus so they can buy the Nautilus that they wanted all along. I don't know. I don't do that game. But I'm not in that market. I don't buy these things new, and I've never owned a Patek. So what do I know? I'm just one Yahoo with a microphone. So it's just one of those things. Aussie says Santos is way more appealing. I completely agree with you. And far superior heritage, absolutely. No one can criticize them being a poached design. Obviously, there's they iterate on it, but unlike Rolex, they do a lot. I mean, they do a lot of like there are dressy Santos, like Cartier, the Santos de Cartier, and then there's the they've got other ones too. So they've got different styles for different, like the one that I've been showing you guys is a sports watch style, the Santos de Cartier watch, but they also have the Dumont. We're in incognito mode. I don't want these cookies on my Chrome. I thought I bookmarked this is why. I bookmarked the Santos. See, I do research, guys. I try and prep this stuff before I go live. But the Santos is that they have some others that I like. Yeah, the Dumonts. These are quartz powered. That's why they're so cheap. But so cheap, he says, when it's 4,200. But you see, the design is a lot dressier without the crown guards and stuff. But it's a different look. I've handled these, and they're very thin. They're kind of neat if you like the idea of a Cartier and don't mind quartz. It could be a cool one. Anyway, I'm not here to sell you a Cartier watch though. So yeah, it's just one of those things. David said the movement is 26.6 millimeters wide. The Cubitus is 45 millimeters across. That gives you almost 20 millimeters of dead space around the movement. And David, I think we are both in agreement, and you can see it. You can absolutely see it. This is letting you see everything that this movement has to show. They want to show off that they decorate. There is a lot of dead space, and it's obvious at the corners in particular. But when you factor in the flanks and stuff, it just again, they've balanced it. It's dead center. Congratulations, you know how to use calipers, but it's not. It's a disappointing sizing, I think. Aussie says, Monaco, at least the current variant looks really cheap. I've not really checked out because none of them have ever looked like a shape I would want to. Just the way that shape executes never appealed to me. I've never checked one out personally. Preacher says, wait, I just noticed the date wheel isn't color matched on a $40,000 watch. That is Patek in spades, though. They don't like to match any, like the Calatravas that I had up earlier, the racing car one. They're not color matched either. It was the first thing that annoyed me about it. To be fair, this is consistent with how they did the Nautilus, and you got to remember burying the Nautilus. So that's the thing. Oh, thank you for the super chat, Thomas, for the rant. And thank you for enjoying. I'm glad you enjoyed the live streams. Let's see. Where was I at with all of this? Oh, and Trap Vision has praised the little rant. It was a mini rant, guys. We want to be positive about watches. The hobbies are supposed to be fun. I ain't ever going to buy this, so I'm having plenty of fun making fun of it. But if you're into it, always remember, I shouldn't have to tell you this, but some people get insecure, I think. Just because I don't like something doesn't mean you shouldn't buy a watch of any sort. There are all sorts of watches I think are hideous that other people absolutely love. I know people who want a Nautilus, and it's my least favorite Genta design. I was going to say until I saw what is the thing, the locomotive or whatever that Creedor has. Oh my gosh, that thing is hideous. But those are my two least favorite. But other people love them, and that's the nice thing is we have so many different types of watches, so we can go and find all sorts of things that we like. But the general shape of this, I do like, and that's where my little mock-up goes and says, like, I would consider any of these over the Patek, but seriously would really only consider the Geo, the Cartier, and the Mito, because these the Mon shape, as creative as it is, isn't for me either. Sorry, I had to cheat and get a drink. Koji says it's a 90s Gap ad with a 60,000 gold watch. Oh, yes, he's referring back to this shot from Audemars Piguet. No one can mess up advertising like Audemars Piguet. Patek, put it in a magazine and then did some interview. Like, their rollout of this was okay. It's just a lot of people, I shouldn't say no one, care for the watch. Trapfish says, if I didn't know any better, I'd say Aussie is a huge fan of the Nautilus Cube and Omega. I think Aussie is a fan of the Nautilus. I don't know on Omegas, but Aussie says, lazy. It's okay if you love a hideous watch, guys. I married a stunner, but you do you guys. It's your life to choose. That's fair. That's fair enough. Hey, maybe this watch has a good personality, Aussie. We haven't asked ourselves that. After all, this new movement does hack. And according to Ben Clymer, again, is he being sarcastic in this article? I'm going to go back to this part. Is this sarcasm, guys? It read like sarcasm, but nothing else about this article reads like sarcasm. So I'm not sure this was sarcastic. This sounds so patronizing, though, if it's not. It's a bit of a party trick. No one's party tricked impressed if you pull out the crown of your watch and the hacking stuff. I don't care how non-watch person a person is.
I didn't know watches didn't hack until I had a Reverso. Like, I didn't get one of the SKXs. I didn't have watches that didn't hack. My quartz watches hacked. I never thought about a watch not hacking. But anyway, I just thought this statement was, here, my head was in part of the way. The statement was super weird, super weird. I don't know. Skatement says, this hobby would be boring. We all like the same watches. True. But then maybe they could build more of the watches we want and we could all buy them. And Pixel says, will we get an ugliest watches of the year stream at some point before January? Maybe. I had been torn if I should do it pre-recorded so I could be efficient with everyone's time, or if you would want to actually do it live and then a chat could try and be in and we interact. I guess leave a comment and let me know what you want. But yes, my plan would be to do it before the end of the year. Even though technically it would be best to do it in 2025, then I'd have the full year to evaluate. But like a lot of award ceremonies, I don't like to wait that long. So yes, I do plan to do it. In fact, one of the things you could do, and my email's in the about section, or if you're on the Discord, or you can leave a comment or whatever, if you want to suggest watches. I have some in mind, but I want to evaluate. And there's a lot of things I don't like. If it doesn't sound interesting to me, I just don't look at it at all. So while I have a few things in my mental short list, and they'll ultimately would be a selection of like 5 or something that I'll pick. And then we can look at others that others suggest. You want to give me ideas, it would be helpful because I don't have 5 in mind immediately as it is. But that's a great segue for me to actually end this, because this stream has gone long. I thought this would be like a 40-minute one because I only had one watch to talk about. But thank you, everyone who was able to tune in live. And for the super, super aggressive and interactive chat, I do appreciate it. And for everyone sharing their thoughts on the Cubitus, if you're watching the recording, share your thoughts on the Cubitus below, including if you love it, it's fine. I'd love to read the opinions that exist. And if you have issues with it, what those issues are. Is it just the sizing? Is it the entire design? Is it you like the design, but you don't like that it's the Nautilus and you'd rather have just had a Nautilus again instead of this thing? I don't know. Everyone's going to be in different places on that. But I will plan to be, I don't know if I'll do a weekday live stream. I have to check the football schedule, but I will plan to be back for a live stream next Saturday. It will not be the ugly watches. I definitely won't be doing that one next week, but it will be something. So anyway, I'm going to end it here. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you all have a really good rest of the weekend. Take care, everybody.